Hey guys, what's up? So we got a very big announcement today. The developers dropped a new roadmap video that I'm going to be kind of going over in this video and talking about exactly what to expect. But basically, the long story short is there's going to be a big kind of like expansion content update that's aimed for May right now in the next couple of months that will overhaul a lot of systems in the game, most notably Path of Champions. They're going to be adding a new kind of Runeterra champion. We'll talk about what that means later. It's very interesting. And they're going to be announcing kind of like how they're going to be handling competitive, seasonals, as well as expeditions in this video. Anyway, I wanted to show you guys the video and then we'll get into my thoughts and feelings about everything. It's very, very big news.
Are you awake? Must be some magic about.
Here in your time of need. Bravo,
Hi, I'm Andrew Yip, Design Director for Legends of Runeterra. I want to introduce you all to Brett Freeman, Director of Strategy, and Dave Guskin, Game Director. Today, we're going to chat about our approach to PvE moving into 2022. We'll also share some details about competitive and updates to our release and balance cadence throughout the new year.
2022 will be a transformative year for LoR. We spent 2020 focused on launch, and 2021 was all about exploration, discovering what was possible with new game modes like the Path of Champions. But now that we've laid the groundwork, we want to build on everything we've learned.
And from what we've seen, you're ready for that too. In fact, more of you are playing the Path of Champions than all other game modes combined. And we've also seen nearly double the amount of players since the mode launched. We hear you loud and clear, and we're already exploring ways to improve the features you're enjoying most. Before Dave walks you through how we'll do that, let's take a look at some highlights since launch.
So basically, the first part of this video is going into the idea that, you know, they're very, very happy with where Path of Champions is as a game mode, and effectively that they're going to be putting kind of more resources and more focus and attention on Path of Champions as a concept. Overall, I'm fairly happy with this. This is kind of the biggest announcement that they're making, obviously saying that, you know, there are a majority of the people playing Legends of Runeterra are playing Path of Champions, which I don't think should be surprising to anyone. It's like an outstanding mode. Like a lot of us know people that have gotten into the game solely because of Path of Champions or off of Path of Champions that maybe didn't even play, you know, League or any of the other games, but they just like Path of Champions so much. But anyway, let's keep watching.
That's how we do things in Bilgewater.
What would you ask of a man with nothing? To die with honor. We're getting hot, hot, hot!
Sentinels, carry the darkness! Fight for the light!
Oh my, what's the correct protocol here?
Tomorrow has never looked so good!
Alan is your first ever Legends of Runeterra World Champion.
It's awesome to see all the enthusiasm, and there's so much more to look forward to. Heading into 2022, the team is focused on bringing you even more storyful adventures and refining the single-player narrative experience with new champions. Then, later this year, we're going to shift our attention to new PvE features, so there are always exciting challenges waiting for you. The Path of Champions was our first attempt in introducing this type of progression system, and since launch we've learned a lot from your feedback. With that in mind, we're planning to remake the game mode to be even more immersive and rewarding in the next release. Instead of playing through the same campaign for all champions, we want to give each champion an experience unique to their story. And progression will mean more than just leveling up or getting new relics. You'll be able to chase specific items for new builds and customize how your champion legend plays through upgrades that are more intentional. For example, maybe you want to swap cards in your starter deck, or change to improve your passive powers. We're working on ways to give you more ownership over how your champion's story plays out. Now, an overhaul like this is going to require a progression reset, but that won't happen until the spring, so keep the feedback coming in the meantime. The team wants to hear from you so we can make the Path of Champions the best it can be. As our priorities shift for all this new content, some features like expeditions will churn out until we have a chance to reimagine a draft-like PvP experience. But as of February 15th, we've uncapped the number of times you can get weekly rewards, so if you've got tokens left, make sure you get your last runs in before the spring update. Thanks again, and stay tuned for more PvE news in the coming months. Now Andrew will take you through the rest of the roadmap for 2022.
Thanks, Dave.
So basically what they're talking about there is that Dave is saying that, you know, of course, with the Path of Champions overhaul, there are some things that we might be looking forward to, right? The idea of, you know, being able to customize more starter decks, more content being added to Path of Champions. I personally am very on board with this. I love Path of Champions, and I felt that there was a little bit missing. I felt like I wanted to be able to do specific kinds of runs and didn't really have the customizability that I wanted for it. So I'm very glad for this overall. That being said, he also alludes to the fact that they're effectively pulling the plug on Expeditions mode as we know it. Of course, that means that, you know, you have a limited amount of time to, you know, play Expeditions before the mode just rotates out, and that they might in the future replace it with a PvP draft kind of mode that they would have to reimagine, which I'm also pretty down with. I feel like there's a lot of players that like draft in other card games that just weren't really big on the way it was set up in Legends of Runeterra. So I'm very up for an overhaul in this regard too, right? Like that's totally fine. I don't exactly know when it'll happen, to be honest. That like the way they said it sounded kind of vague, and the like in the maybe future, possibly, who knows. Anyway, let's keep watching.
First, let's talk content cadence. Bandle City marked our final region, so we won't have the same update schedule as we've had in the past. After a curious journey, we want to focus on standalone expansions that each explore something new. These won't always be the same size or even shape, and they'll add champions to both PvP and PvE. It's important to highlight that Runeterra is so much more than just a collection of regions. There are many champions who wander from place to place or have conflicting loyalties, champions that could also bring unique mechanics and depth to gameplay. We're calling these Runeterra champions, and they'll break out of traditional region rules. So how do these Runeterra champions work? Well, luckily, one of them has kindly offered to give you a peek behind the curtain. You've probably heard of him. Jin the Virtuoso.
Art requires a certain cruelty.
Each Runeterra champion has specific deck building rules that are unique to them. As an example, putting Jin in a deck allows you to include cards with skills from all other regions. This opens up a ton of new ways to strategize, and we can't wait for you to see how other Runeterra champs will shake up deck building in expansions to come.
All right. So that's absolutely crazy. Basically, what he's saying is that these new champions, the new class of cards that are getting added, these so-called Runeterra champions that have the special white border, basically they have completely unique deck building rules. Jin, for example, if you run him, you can run any outside of region, you can run any cards that have skills on them, right? That summon skills like Arachnoid Sentry, or that put a skill out when they attack, like Legion Saboteur. You can just run any of those cards regardless of region. You can have like a 10 region deck with Jin, and each of them is going to have a completely different rule on how they enable deck building, right? We don't know what the others are, but that's an example of like, you know, how they might work with Jin and his skill thing. This I think is phenomenally cool. This is probably my favorite news of this entire video. I'm super happy about this. I love the idea of kind of like divergent deck building patterns. I think a lot of people look at that and they're like, oh, these are kind of like neutral heroes, right? They're like neutral champions. Does that, but like a lot of people think that it might have the same problem as like Bandle City, because obviously like Bandle City feels like, and of course I released the video on some of the problems of Bandle City, that they're kind of like too insert everywhere. I don't get that idea or sense from these Runeterra champion mechanics whatsoever. These are not just like neutral champions that you can throw anywhere. If they have very specific deck building limitations and ways they allow you to build, then they're going to be kind of the opposite of just like auto jam in, right? They take over your deck and allow you to build decks in new and interesting and divergent ways. This is literally the opposite of what I would consider to be the Bandle City problem. It's amazing. I'm super stoked about this. All right, let's keep watching.
A quick update on competitive in 2022. Seasonal tournaments are here to stay, and the best players on each shard will be able to compete for prizes, glory, and a chance to enter into our 2022 World Championship. However, this year, we're no longer holding official broadcasts for each seasonal tournament. Instead, we're going to double down and devote all of our efforts to Worlds this year to make sure it's the best experience possible. Lastly, I want to talk about our balance cadence. We just saw
So that last part I'm gonna have to talk about. Basically, they are no longer doing seasonal broadcasts, and that's one that I think a large amount of the Runeterra community is talking about since this announcement dropped. And it's something that affects me a lot because, of course, I cast the seasonal broadcast. It affects, you know, all of you guys that watch them. Basically, yeah, they're no longer doing seasonal broadcasts. And I think that's one that has kind of like caused them as concern in the community. A lot of people are saying, you know, they're kind of like pulling resources out of the competitive scene. A lot of my friends that play in these tournaments that I have, you know, aspirations of trying to kind of like go pro in Legends of Runeterra have, you know, been very concerned with this because it means like maybe the tournament scene, you know, it's not necessarily getting bigger. Obviously these tournaments are still going to be ongoing, but without broadcasts and without as much incentive to do well, it's definitely feeling to a lot of players like kind of like a step back in that regard. And I don't think that's unfair. For the competitive community for Legends of Runeterra, that is kind of bad news. A lot of people were looking forward to seeing how the competitive scene would kind of be like growing and seeing like if there were going to be additional tournaments or additional broadcasts or something in the coming year. And of course, we're getting kind of like the opposite. And yeah, for the most part, I think a lot of people are thinking about, you know, trying to compete in other games if you're in the competitive scene. At the end of the day, I think this is kind of a very, very understandable decision on Riot's part. They want to focus more on like the PvE crowd, the PvE audience, and I think there's nothing wrong with that. I know a lot of you guys watching this right now are primarily Path of Champions players and don't even really watch the seasonal broadcast, so it's fine. I personally kind of need to, I guess, have more time to decide how I exactly really feel about this moving forward. But one thing I will say is that as long as I'm still playing Runeterra, will personally be live streaming these seasonals. So for the qualifiers, outside of the full top 32 broadcasts, I have been streaming every single seasonal, the qualifier brackets, and kind of like watching between the perspectives of the players. I will personally, regardless of what happens to the seasonals moving forward, I'll be doing some coverage of the top 32 on my own channel on twitch.tv/swimstream. I cannot, it's not going to be, you know, it's not going to have a production budget. Anyone who I'll have around who's down to cast with me, I'll just pull into the call and we'll watch over the players' games, whoever's streaming at the time, and we'll at least hang out, look at the games, talk about it a little bit. It'll be kind of a more casual vibe. It's not going to be a well-produced seasonal, but at the very least, I can promise you there will be something. And whenever this happens, I'll be putting out a message through the YouTube community posts that anyone who's subscribed to me will see, you know, hint, hint, wink, wink, that is going to be able to alert you guys like, oh, you know, the seasonals is happening in, you know, a day or a day and a half or whatever. You can tune in and watch it. We'll just have a nice casual hangout. That's going to be the vibe. Anyway, let's go ahead and finish this video.
A massive balance patch drop with over 30 new changes, and you can expect more patches like this every other month.
Yep,
thanks to your input, we've brought some familiar faces and strategies like Control back into the limelight, and also adjusted some archetypes to more reasonable power levels like Azarelia, Yordles, and Kinku Wayfinder, who as it turns out was really just 3 Teemos in a trench coat.
Nothing like the great outdoors.
Beyond our updated cadence, we're always keeping an ear to the ground to solve emergent issues, even if they fall outside of a scheduled patch window. So keep that feedback coming, and the team will keep making adjustments so the game stays fresh and fun to play. Now here's Brett to wrap things up.
With all the new content Andrew just talked about, we know you're wondering about rotation. So here's the official stance. It's complicated, especially for a game like ours, which relies on champions and their supporting cards. We understand the problems that rotation can solve and are keeping a close eye on them.
So just to tell you right now, rotation, for those of you guys who don't know, in card games outside of Legends of Runeterra that have been around for a while, they do this thing and they do it in a lot of different ways, but basically every year or two, they will rotate in new cards and rotate out some of the old ones. Not all of the old ones. Sometimes there's like an evergreen set that keeps some of the old cards throughout rotations, but it would be like some amount of the old cards getting rotated out. It would still be available for play in kind of like an uncapped format where you could just play with all the cards. But for most card games, the kind of competitive or ranked format is only including the newest rotation of cards, and this is a way to kind of like keep the card pool fresh throughout the times. Excuse me, there's a lot of pros and cons with rotations that you have to consider as a developer. At the end of the day, a big problem with card games arises when the card pool gets into the thousands, and when you can just use thousands and thousands of cards in deck building, you have a lot of problems with, you know, certain combinations being OP, or, you know, you end up in scenarios where people are just using the newest cards anyway because of power creep, so you kind of like have to run them. At the end of the day, there's a lot of problems with how specific games have done rotations. I'd be interested in rotations being done in a very specific way in Legends of Runeterra, but of course, I mean, they aren't commenting on it whatsoever. They're basically just saying rotations are complicated and we still don't really have anything to announce in that regard. So,
by the way, you might have noticed a different loading screen last time you logged in. Or maybe you used the colorblind mode released last year. Or seen how Click UI has expanded beyond labs for better accessibility. We definitely want to keep releasing these kinds of quality of life updates where we can in 2022. Finally, let's take a look at where personalization is headed this year. We want to continue making richer, more dynamic skins that have custom animations.
Onward, everybody! The horizon calls!
Is it the mustache? Who knows?
Better! Brighter than before!
We're also planning to add themed champion spells to all of the existing epic skins in April. Additionally, we'll release free Arcane Jinx and Vi skins to celebrate LoR's 2nd anniversary in that same patch. Lastly, if you're enjoying the arcade battle event, keep an eye out for more events later this year, including Pulsefire in the spring. That's all we can tell you for now. There's so much to be excited about this year, and the team can't wait to share more with you in the coming weeks and months.
With your feedback and support, Legends of Runeterra has grown into something that we never could have imagined 2 short years ago. It's been a journey, but the real adventure was the Lux emotes that we endured along the way.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
all right. So yeah, no, that's basically the run of it. So in the next couple of months, we're going to have some big updates along the ideas of, you know, the Path of Champions. We're going to be getting a couple of balance patches. They mentioned that we're going to be getting balance patches every 2 months, which is a little bit on the low end. A lot of people were hoping that, you know, in the past, the dev team has communicated a few times that like more balance patches were going to be on the way, like, you know, kind of like returning to an older time when they were giving us balance patches like every 2 weeks. It's going to be every 2 months, and they're basically confirming that for sure. The last thing that excuse me, the last thing that I haven't mentioned here is that they also announced that they're going to release sets in different ways, right? They're going to have one big expansion, and that's going to be, instead of like breaking down the sets into splitting them into 3 parts like they've done with Targon, Shurima, Vandal City, they're going to have expansions that are going to be one big expansion. This to me is also really, really great news, because of course the splitting expansions into 3 different parts felt really, really awkward to a lot of people, myself included. It felt like, compared to other card games, it sort of like, you know, left you with like not a lot of different new things you could do, right? You just kind of like messing around with most of the old stuff with some of the relics of the new stuff, right? In this case, I think that having large expansions to look forward to, even if they happen less frequently, is going to be really interesting. I love the idea of these Runeterra champions, whatever that will come with that. I love interesting new deck building rules, and I'm really happy that Path of Champions is getting more love, and particularly more customization. There's a lot more to do with it, and I personally plan on playing a lot of Path of Champions when that new content gets released, right? I mean, this is overall a bit of a pivot for the game. The game is now, I mean, before, I think Legends of Runeterra was very much a PvP game with a PvE side option, right? Like it at least with like Lab of Legends and like the start of Path of Champions. But as of now, they're basically announcing that they're going to be treating the modes equally, if not even potentially favoring Path of Champions, right? Like, this is now a fleshed out, it's not just a side mode. This is like, in a lot of ways, one of the main aspects of the game is going to be the single player Path of Champions. And honestly, a lot of how like it's very divisive news, right? Because a lot of players love Path of Champions and it's literally why they started playing the game. A lot of players love PvP and don't really dig with Path of Champions, and so the news is going to affect different people differently. I personally want to wait and see exactly what the new Path of Champions is going to look like before I can say anything for sure. But as much as I'm a little bit hesitant about the collapse of the competitive broadcast scene, I'm going to miss those quite a bit. And I know a lot of the competitive community, a lot of the competitive community, I got it, is going to as well. At the same time, I am glad that we're getting, you know, more into Path of Champions, which a lot of people do enjoy. And I can't wait to see exactly what we're going to be having there. But anyway, that's the breakdown of the dev video we got. And yeah, no, it's going to be an interesting couple of months. Until then, I'll see you guys next time.